Ancient China employed various punishments for centuries to maintain social order and deter criminal behavior. From gruesome executions to public shaming rituals, the methods used by Chinese authorities were both varied and controversial. Hello, and welcome back to the Abandoned Archaeologist, the channel to learn all about ancient archaeological findings. Today, we delve into the fascinating history of punishment in ancient China and explore these practices' cultural and social implications. But before we begin, to get your attention, we have a question you can answer at the end of the video. Who abolished 4 of the 5 punishments? Write down your answer in the comment section and see if you got it right. Here we begin. China has a long history of being known as one of the most brutal places for the punishment of crimes. Ancient Chinese dynasties were particularly notorious for their brutality towards criminals, as exemplified by their code of punishments, the 5 punishments. Slaves were subjected to even harsher punishments, making their lives an endless cycle of suffering and pain. Around 4,000 years ago, China was ruled by the Xia dynasty between 2100 BC to 1600 BC, and it was during this period the first established form of the Chinese government came into existence. The ruling class consisted mainly of aristocrats who maintained a considerable distance from the average citizens, primarily peasants, farmers, merchants, and craftsmen. This class divide was common in most countries worldwide, including China. To maintain law and order, the Chinese government established a set of capital punishments known as the 5 punishments of slaves, which were meted out to those who committed crimes. It's important to note that the term slaves in this context did not refer to people in bondage as we understand it today, but rather any male citizen in the Chinese Empire who had committed a crime. The 5 punishments of slaves were used for 4,000 years of Chinese history, and this period is referred to as Ancient China. Although we know that these punishments were set out in the Xia dynasty, it was not until the Shang dynasty, starting in 1600 BC, that the first recorded written history of ancient China and the carrying out of the 5 punishments came into existence. It is fascinating to note that despite the passage of 4,000 years, the 5 punishments of slaves remain relevant in Chinese culture and society today. In modern times, however, the punishments have been considerably moderated and revised to reflect China's changing social and cultural landscape. Nonetheless, understanding these punishments' historical and cultural significance remains essential to understanding China's long and complex history. So what were the 5 punishments for slaves? In ancient China, the penal punishment system was based on 5 forms of punishment for slaves, each designed to humiliate, cripple, or even kill the offender. The first punishment was mo or qing, which involved marking an offender's face and head with tattoos. This punishment was considered particularly cruel because it was believed that a marked person was no longer quite human. Furthermore, the shunning of a law-abiding society made this punishment ostracizing. The second punishment, yi, involved cutting off the offender's nose without anesthetic. This form of punishment was painful and disfiguring, leaving the offender with a permanent reminder of their crime. Ui, the third punishment, was a harsher form of yi, where the offender's left or right foot or both were amputated, effectively crippling them for life. This punishment was especially cruel in ancient China, where most citizens were peasant farmers. Moreover, losing a foot or both made it difficult to earn a living in the future, further shaming and humbling the offender. The fourth punishment, gong, involved castration. In this punishment, the offender's testicles and penis were removed, and they were sent to live as a eunuch in the imperial palace. This punishment was most commonly used for those caught in indecent behavior or those trying to incite rebellion. The fifth and final punishment was dapi, also known as the death sentence, considered the highest punishment. The different methods of execution in ancient China were creative and horrifying, with the most common methods being quartering, or cutting the body into 4 pieces, boiling alive, tearing apart the body by attaching each limb to a chariot cutting in two, or lingqi, death by 1,000 cuts. Women also had their own 5 forms of punishment, arguably milder than those doled out to men. These punishments included confinement, beating, tattooing, hair cutting, and forced labor. Let's take a look at the 5 punishments for women. The ancient Chinese penal system had severe punishments for both men and women, with women's punishments being arguably milder than those given to men. For example, punishment number 1 for women was Ying Chong, which involved being forced to grind green. While not physically torturous, it was a psychologically difficult punishment, with women expected to complete the task in a certain amount of time or risk getting another bucket that was harder to grind in the right amount of time. Punishment number 2 was Zhangqing, where the women's fingers were trapped between the sticks, pulled taut by 2 court ushers to extract information or confessions. This punishment can be compared to ancient thumb screws, causing immense pain and possible permanent damage. Punishment number 3 was Zhangxing, where women were beaten with wooden staves. This punishment was physically painful and could cause serious injury or even death. Punishment number 4 was Shi, which forced women to commit suicide. Methods of self-execution in Imperial China, including cutting your throat, taking poison, or hanging yourself. This punishment was often used to avoid the guilty party's family from losing face. Punishment number 5 was given to women guilty of adultery or licentious behavior, similar to the 4th penal punishment for men, gong or castration. However, instead of castration, women were confined to a small room with no food until they outlived their punishment or died of starvation. This was a gruesome punishment that caused immense suffering and slow death. The use of brutal punishment methods in China continued for over 2,000 years, from the Shang, Zhao, and Jin dynasties, until it was eventually abolished during Emperor Wen of Han, 203 BC to 157 BC, in the Western Han dynasty. The emperor replaced the cruel punishment methods with the 5 punishments for serfs. These were later reformed to be less cruel by Emperor Han of Wen due to the appeal of Qiang Tang, the daughter of a high-ranking official who had been wrongfully convicted for the death of a noble woman. Tang appealed to the emperor directly, highlighting the cruelty implicit in the 5 punishments and offering to take her father's place as a slave for life. She pointed out that they cannot come back to life once a person is executed. Similarly, if a person is mutilated, even if they were later found to be innocent, they would be disabled for life, and there is no way to reverse the suffering they had experienced. Therefore, even if they wished to start anew, they could not. Emperor Wen was so impressed by Tang's words that he abolished 4 of the 5 punishments, removing all forms of mutilation and amputation from the list of Chinese penal punishments. Instead, criminals were whipped for their crimes with either bamboo strips or sticks, with each crime bestowing a different number of lashes. The 5 punishments originally used in China were flogging, tattooing, amputation, castration, and death. Flogging was used for minor crimes such as theft, while tattooing was used for crimes such as forgery. Amputation was used for serious crimes such as murder and treason, while castration was reserved for crimes against the state, such as rebellion. Finally, death was the ultimate punishment for the most serious crimes, such as regicide. The 5 punishment system established the foundation for punishment in Chinese law for almost 4,000 years. After the transition from the 5 punishments for slaves to the 5 punishments for serfs, not much changed for centuries. However, other methods of punishment were utilized in ancient China beyond the 5 punishments, such as caning, branding, and even execution by being boiled alive or torn apart by horses. These methods often punish more severe offenses, such as rebellion or treason. Therefore, the 5 punishments were just a small part of ancient China's larger spectrum of punishment methods. So what do you think of these punishments in ancient China? Comment below. And the answer to our question is, Emperor Wen of Han abolished 4 of the 5 punishments and replaced them with the less cruel method of whipping. Make sure to subscribe for more such videos.